Welcome back, guys. We are back here on the Pulse. Sorry that we lost connection there. I smashed my head off the keyboard when Al made that terrible 49ers pick for prediction. So I'm really sorry about that, guys. But yeah, it stopped recording because of that. So we are back for our World Series preview now. So let's jump into this real quick. And we're talking about Arizona and Texas here. Now, listen, both teams, they had tremendous storylines on their treks to the World Series. It's been really awesome for both teams. But interesting thing now, both of these teams lost over 100 games 2 seasons ago. Like,
Yeah.
is this an improbable World Series run that both of them have had?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you had given me 10 guesses of who was gonna come out of the National League this year, I don't think Arizona would have been in those 10 guesses. I wouldn't have. And even like this year with Arizona, they kind of started out hot, but then got really cold midseason. And they kind of sneaked into the playoffs. I mean, 84 wins. We haven't had a World Series participant with that few of wins since the 2006 Cardinals, who had 83 wins and ended up winning the World Series that year against the
Well,
Tigers. So shout out Big Ray. Uh, but yeah, no, it's just insane. I every step of the way I have not picked them, and they have proved me wrong. So
well, they proved me wrong too, right? Like it
yeah,
just it's kind of sad. But let's dive into this. Let's take a look at their journey to the big dance because I think it's not only about the destination but like the journey that it takes to get there. And I think there's a lot of appreciation that we can pull out of both of these teams. Now I know we had talked about it a little bit. Arizona, you were saying when was their last World Series appearance that they had? Hmm?
yeah. So they only this is we're gonna get real excited about this. I love World Series history, and I've read a lot of books about it. So their only World Series appearance was in 2001. And they beat the Yankees in 7 games. And the Yankees at this time were trying to go for their fourth title in a row, which had been unheard of since like the Yankees in the 50s.
Hmm.
And it gets to a game 7. First of all, to get to that point, their closer, Byung Kim, who was a closer for the Red Sox for 5 minutes, and everybody hated him, blew two straight games. And really got the Yankees back in the series. And this was the first World Series because of 9/11 that was played in November. And it's capped off by Jeter hitting that walk-off homer as the clock struck midnight. It turned to November 1st. So they called him Mr. November for a minute, which respectfully is fucking dumb.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. But game 7, Rivera comes in to close the game out, and Luis Gonzalez hits a walk-off bloop single, and the D-backs win it, man. And Rivera at that point was, if he came in, it was over.
Yeah.
Especially in the playoffs, it was over. Like you stood no chance whatsoever. So yeah, so that's just wild, and that's their only World Series appearance.
That's pretty
So
crazy.
and also too with this team, they are the first team. They're one of two teams um, to make the World Series with a negative run differential. The other team being the '87 Twins. Which is just bananas. Like that should not happen, and it doesn't happen typically. So that's just kind of goes to show you what kind of run they've been on this year,
Hmm. And how
especially in these playoffs.
and how did the Twins fare in '87?
They won the World Series 4 games to 3 against St. Louis.
Well,
So
maybe.
shout out Frank Viola,
Yeah.
World Series MVP.
Maybe they have luck on their side. So, what about
Yeah.
Texas? When was their last appearance that they had? Hmm?
Their World Series history is a little more rough. So they've made 2 World Series in their lifetimes. Back to back years. 2010 they lost to the Giants. Um, and which was just kind of that was what it was. The Giants just came in hot that year. 2011 though is the year that Texas fans don't want to talk about. So I'm gonna set the stage for you. It's game 6. Okay. Texas is up 3 games to 2 in this series. Okay. St. Louis is down to their last strike in the bottom of the ninth. Okay. Their last strike. Freese ties it up. David Freese, who becomes the World Series MVP. So they go into extras. Okay. Bottom of the 10th, same thing, down to their last strike. Again, Lance Berkman hits a single, ties it up. And then David Freese hits a walk-off in the 11th. And then St. Louis wins game 7 going away. And that's all she wrote. But that was one of the more heartbreaking games I've ever watched, in a World Series. Just to be down to your last strike twice and to not be able to close it out is just bananas.
Yeah, that's really tough, and especially both of us are analytical guys when we think about sports, and knowing we kind of do the math in our head, like, okay, like, all right, he's got to do this, this, and this, and like maybe he can win the match, or like they've got to score this and then kick the field goal, or be able to get the 2 point conversion here, and then they can tie it up and possibly win by one, or so it's when we see that, it's I don't know, that's kind of the beauty in it, beauty in the sport when we understand it
Yeah.
that way. It's a lot of fun to be able to think of sports that way. But now let's talk about the Diamondbacks first. They just cooled off a very hot team with the Phillies, and how disappointed should Philly be for losing that series?
They had it all. Philly blew this series in a multitude of ways. First of all, game 3 and game 4, their bullpen, Kimbrel just came in with a gas can and just couldn't get anybody out. And as somebody that watched Craig Kimbrel in the 2018 playoffs, that's kind of the Craig Kimbrel story. It's maddening. It is. You're gonna just run the gamut of emotions. And they really had a chance, especially game 3. They really had the chance to like put their foot on their throats and like really take a control of that series, and they let Arizona hang around and hang around, and then you know they take game 5. So you're like, okay, they have game 6, they have game 7, like they have
They're gonna
Nola going
win
in game
one,
6.
right? They're
Yeah,
gonna
they
win
have
one of
Nola
those
going in.
games. Yeah.
Yeah, they have Nola going in game 6. So you're like, okay,
Mhm.
cool. They're gonna close this out. It's fine. Nola gets rocked, and you're like, okay. And then like I always keep saying this, game 7, like weird shit happens.
Yeah.
Weird shit happens. And like game 7, this was no exception. Like Corbin Carroll, who had gone like 3 for 23 up until that point, went 3 for 4 in that game. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just weird stuff like that. So
Well, and it's interesting too because I didn't realize that Arizona, like I had to do some research on this team because again, we didn't expect they were going to be here, but this team lost their first 9 games they started when August started. Like they did
yeah,
not look good at all, and they talk about momentum, how important that is. Like while they were losing 9 games straight, my Braves were turning in wins. And where are they, right? Like they're
yeah,
watching the World Series from their couch, they're playing golf, all of that. But team only wins 84 games this season. So like they're like 50% almost as a team. Like
yeah,
it's just they would have been the last team I would have picked. I know you said that too, but there's just no way like I would have decided to select them to move on. But they've played with this like the back against the wall mentality. Like how did they use this to their advantage? Because I felt like no one was picking them at any point in the postseason. They weren't picking them in
yeah,
the wild card game. They weren't picking them against the Dodgers. They were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, but the Dodgers will play the Phillies." Like, and then they go and beat the Dodgers handily.
yeah.
The Dodgers didn't win a game in that series, right?
Yeah,
It,
they I'll tell you, they first of all, I learned the other day. I read this fun stat. For the last like I think it's like I don't know, like 6 or 7 years in the playoffs, like if you beat Milwaukee in the playoffs, you go to the World Series,
really?
which is just bonkers. But they took out Milwaukee, who I thought had the best rotation kind of going in the National League for the
Hmm.
playoffs. And I thought, I was like, okay, they took 2 or 3, they did it on the road, all right, but they're going to run into the Dodgers. And while the Dodgers, their starting pitching is not great, they're going to run into the buzzsaw that is that lineup.
Yeah.
And then they neutralized the Dodgers, man, and same thing. And I am flabbergasted by what this team has done,
Yeah.
because this team isn't their lineup isn't great,
Well,
but
we're
they're just piecing it together, and it's Marte, it's Carroll. Like, and honestly, what's been carrying them is their bullpen. Arizona's bullpen's been lights out.
Hmm.
So
Well, I'm glad you brought up Carroll because, like, I know he didn't play that well in the series, but came through in Game 7 and stuff. But Marte, like, the stats that I'm seeing, they're ridiculous, man. They really are.
yeah,
Dude, he's batting 358 in the postseason, 19 hits, 32 total bases. Like, that's super impressive. Like, this
well,
guy's.
also too, he has a 17 game hit streak in the playoffs currently,
Oh, man.
which is bananas. Yeah.
Let me ask you because I know you wanted to get into talking about their bullpen, but like, who has been the MVP on this team for you this postseason?
It's Marte for them.
Okay.
Like, Marte has just been the guy that has been steady. Like, you know what I mean? He's steady. He's reliable. He's always going to get you a couple hits. He's always kind of setting the table. It's him and Carroll. Like, and Corbin Carroll didn't really do much in the NLCS, but like the threat, he's always a threat,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes a lot out of pitchers. And then you saw in the last two games, like they stole 8 bases. That really turned that series around for them. They were just stealing bases left and right, and that was putting more guys in scoring position, and they took advantage of that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, the Diamondbacks, they've got two pretty good starters with Zach Allen and Merrill Kelly, and like they've rode both of them through the playoffs. But and we finally figured out how to say his name. It's Fott. Rhymes with
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
he
yeah.
didn't pitch well in the wild card series against the Brewers, but he had two very good starts against the Dodgers and then the Phillies. And like, is this rotation now becoming like the strength of this team as well?
I for me, it's their bullpen. It's the ones. So they didn't really have a good bullpen this season.
Hmm.
So, but they did what they did at the deadline. They traded for Seattle's closer, Paul Sewald, who's kind of brought them some like it just kind of is like kind of steadied. It's like it's kind of like been the calm.
Hmm.
They now have a reliable closer, and they have this guy named Kevin Ginkel that like it's been Ginkel and Sewald. Ginkel's been the eighth inning guy, and then Sewald's the ninth inning guy, and they have been lights out in these playoffs. For me, that to me has been really the thing that I wasn't prepared for is
Well,
how good their bullpen has been in the playoffs.
dude, they've pitched 10 and 2/3 innings. They've got an ERA at what under 1.98. Like
Yeah,
they had a really good game against the Phillies in Game 7 when they needed them. I mean that's you need that. You need to have good pitching, and their bats are coming alive too, and that's what's winning them games.
yeah, no, I agree, and they have a good manager in Torey Lovello,
Hmm.
who was our bench coach for from 2013 to 2016. Won a ring with a 2013 team.
Hmm.
A lot of Sox fans thought after 2016 that John Farrell was going to get fired because nobody really liked him, even though he had won a title. He just wasn't. He wasn't a manager that people really liked. So everybody thought that Farrell was going to get the axe in 2016 after they got swept by Cleveland. But that didn't happen. They kept Farrell for one more year. So Torey Lovella went to Arizona and has been the manager ever since.
Well, yeah, and
So
like I gotta be honest with you, I didn't know much about him other than like what I've read in articles about him
yeah,
and the GM Mike Hazen, but both have been through a lot, man. Like I look at
yeah,
it and just a real sad piece of it. Hazen's wife passing away in 2021 from glioblastoma. Like that's just like
yeah,
it seems like they've used something that's very painful like that and what could cause a lot of depression as their strength. And they've kind of used that to kind of lighten the mood and drive them as a team. Like, can you speak for a little bit about the job that you think Hazen's done in putting this team together, like keeping this organization together?
yeah. So Arizona's always a team that doesn't have like a high payroll, but they always have to kind of pick up guys that you're like they have a lot of dudes that would be like good solid bench players on most teams, but they're just kind of like thrust into the starting lineup because they don't really have anybody else. You know, their lineup is just really it's well put together. You know, they got guys like Tommy Pham, and they keep drafting well. They have a decent farm system, and you're starting to see the results of that. Especially the first real results of that was calling Corbin Carroll up this year. the dude's going to win Rookie of the Year, and it's not even close.
Hmm.
And
Well, I
I
know
just,
it's been some struggles in the past few years. I know, like, kind
yeah,
of dating back, I knew about the Baumgartner contract. That was really rough. Like, they had some players that just didn't pan out, and then they deal Robbie Ray. And then they watch him kind of win the Cy Young, like the league on fire with that. They had
yeah,
rookies that weren't panning out, and then all of a sudden they move on from these guys and they start playing well, and it's like that's such a tough thing. Like, it's a big risk. So, like, Lavolo just didn't have those things falling in his favor for that. But it seems like this year it's gone right for him.
yeah. No, it really has. Like I said, when he took over in 2017, like they had a pretty talented team. I mean, that team went to the playoffs. They won 93 games. Like eh, he's just always been a good manager, and Torey Lovullo too is just a guy that's just well liked in the league.
Hmm.
Like everybody just has nothing but nice things to say about him. So like when they started making this run, I was really just happy for him because like everybody in Boston loved that guy. Like everybody wanted that guy to be our manager in the worst way, and it just didn't happen. And I'm just glad that good things are happening to him, and that they're 4 wins away from a World Series.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is they're going to have to go through this Texas team, who seems like they're primed and ready to go as well. And listen, before we talk about Texas, it doesn't mean anything now. But in early August, I did pick the Rangers to make the World Series, but I had them losing to the Braves. So part of that was right.
Yeah.
So, but listen, I went back over my notes from the postseason preview. I looked at some of the things, and some of these things did hold true. Like, we talked about Texas's fielding, their batting as well, that they were strong suits for the Rangers, and it's kind of guided them through this postseason as well. I had some questions whether they were going to be the best team in the AL, but they've seemed to have proved it. And like you've said a few times now, you beat the champs. Now
Yep.
they're no longer the best team in the league. So it's time for someone else to wear the crown, and it seems like Texas kind of wants to do that.
Yeah. Not only did they beat the champs, they took Game 6, and Game 7 in Houston's home ballpark.
Yeah.
That's kind of a statement right there. Like, hey, like we're not afraid of you. We're not scared of you. Like, and they took care of business, and you can't really knock that, man. Like I give all the respect in the world to them. So, but their lineup is
Hmm.
just dudes that can hit. Like, man, it's Semien, it's Seager, it's Adolis Garcia, like Mitch Garver, like Nathaniel Lowe, or sorry, Lau. Yeah, they just got dudes that can just hit up and down this lineup.
Yeah,
So
they've got some really good people, and I know you definitely want to talk about Garcia because I mean I just looking at him, right, 327 in the postseason, 7 home runs, 20 RBIs, 39 total bases. That's crazy. Like, why does that
yeah,
matter?
well, especially what it matters is what he did in Game 6 and Game 7. He was responsible for half of the runs driven in those two games. He had that big grand slam to give him a kind of that cushion at the end of Game 6,
Hmm.
which was huge. And then in Game 7, he put the team on his back and was just like, "Hey, we're gonna go there." And they kept pitching to him, and he just kept hitting dingers, man. Like
Right.
it just was just it. His story is just wild too because like 2019, the Cardinals put him on waivers. Uh, Texas picks him up. Texas puts him on waivers 2 years ago at the start
Hmm.
of before spring training.
You're right.
They bring him back. Nobody claims him, by the way. 29 other teams had a chance to claim him. Nobody claims him. So they invite him to camp in 2021, and then he makes the All Star team, and then he just hasn't looked back since, man.
All
So
right. Well, and I'm looking at this too. Like, they have. I'm just looking at who is it that we have? Evaldi and Montgomery. They both pitched pretty well for them. Is that right?
yeah, no, Evaldi, Nasty Nate is just, man, he was good. I forever will have the respect for him. What I watched with him on that 2018 team,
Hmm.
that game, I think it was Game 3 where they went 18 innings, and he pitched the last like 6 or 7 innings like by himself, and just knew, and like the Sox knew they didn't have anybody else in the pen, so it was just him that was going to have to keep going. And for that, like if you ask any Red Sox then they will have nothing but great things to ever say about that guy. Like, and Montgomery, the Yankees traded him. The Yankees got rid of him to the
Yeah.
Cardinals because they were like, we're good. And he has been a revelation for Texas when Texas picked him up. They traded for him this season, and it's really paid off for them. They've been those two have been their two starters have been just been nice. So, but what does concern me with Texas is their bullpen.
Hmm. Well, how do you
It,
think they're going to fare in this matchup? Because I was looking at it too, and I was a little concerned about it, but I know you definitely have some thoughts on that.
yeah, their bullpen has just been overworked, and it's weird because most of the time, like if you have a bad bullpen, that's going to come back and haunt you. But they're scoring so many runs that it doesn't matter, which is that usually you don't see that in baseball, or at least it's very rare. So they're really going to need their starters to go 6, 7 innings, and like
Hmm.
they're going to need to put up a lot of runs so they can give those relief pitchers a cushion. So if something does break down, like it's not the end of the world.
Right. And like, let's talk about Bruce Bochy real quick. Do you think he is capable of leading this team to another ring?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have watched a lot of him, especially with the Giants. I had a former roommate who was a big Giants fan. Shout out, Syracuse Shane. Um, Big
Another
Giants
Shane.
fan. Yeah. Yep. And he loved the Giants. So we watched a lot of the Giants, and what he did with those teams was just a masterclass in managing talent, expectations. It just a quality human and top manager.
Hmm.
So, and he's fun fact with him, he is the third manager to lead three different teams to a pennant, which I think is really impressive.
That's very
So,
impressive. Well,
yeah.
looking at it and stuff, what adjustments do you see him making against Arizona? Because, good managers, a sign of them is like they're going to make good decisions and stuff. So what do you see changing in this World Series matchup, and what do you see him adjusting on?
Well, I don't think he's going to really pitch to Marte, and I don't think he's. I think he's going to limit the damage that Marte and Carroll is going to do to them. I think they're gonna pitch around him, not really give him anything to hit, and he's going to dare the rest of that lineup to beat him.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, that's a pretty solid strategy.
Yeah, I
So
think you kind of have to limit the playmakers on that team, and the more you're able to do that and kind of remove them from the equation, the better chance you're going to have of winning. So, but look in here, game one matchup we have Gallen and Evaldi. What are your thoughts on them and going into
ooh,
this?
that is a good pitching matchup, and I can't wait for that.
Hmm.
That's just two guys that are top of their games right now, and
Yep.
I think you're going to see a low scoring affair. I really do.
Okay.
Um, that being said, I have been racking my brain for days trying to figure out who I think is going to win this matchup, and I really I think it's going to be Texas. Like I know I've picked against Arizona every step of the way. And that being said, I think Texas just has a better offense, and I think they're hitting the cover off the ball right now, and I think that's ultimately what's going to do it for them. And I think I have Texas winning this series in 6 games.
Yeah, and not to mention, or I want to mention this as well, is that just that Texas has done very well with home field advantage, and I know it was the regular season, right? Like it doesn't really
Right?
matter now, but I think at least with World Series, you're packing the stands, fans are going to be nuts. I
Yeah.
imagine they're going to continue that trend of playing well at home. But
Yeah, they were. Well, that's the thing is like they weren't at least. So they only had to play one home game leading up to the ALCS, which they won because they
mhm,
swept Baltimore. They got swept at home in that ALCS, and it was weird because the Texas has played, like you said, they played really well at home this year, but like they're gonna need to like right that ship because like they have home field in the play for the World Series, and that's really gonna matter.
yeah.
That and Yeah, they got to right that ship somehow, or else they're in big trouble.
Well, let me ask you one just last question here on it. Who might be the surprise of this World Series? Like a guy. Okay, so we know the stars on the teams, we know all of that stuff, but who is one guy that you think could come out of the woodwork and possibly be a difference maker for either team in this World Series?
I'll give you one for each, and I think you haven't really seen a lot of Marcus Semien this playoffs, and I think he could be a guy that really steps up for them. He's kind of struggled these playoffs, and like that is what that is. They haven't really needed him that much, but I think he could really be the key to, because if you have Seager going and you have Garcia going, just having another bat in the lineup like that, if Semien can get going, it's watch out,
Mm-hmm.
watch out. So, and I think for Arizona too, they had this guy. He had two pinch hit home runs, if I remember correctly. I think it was game 4, game 5, or game 5 and game 6. But Alec Thomas hit two pinch hit home runs for them, and also they had this catcher. I drawing a blank. I think his name's it's Montero. This guy named Montero, and he has really been calling great games. And I think he's going to have to keep doing that against this lineup, because this lineup, like, you can't make a mistake against them.
Yeah,
You just can't.
they'll make you
So
pay for it for sure.
yeah,
Man,
Gabriel Montero. That's Moreno. Sorry, Moreno, not
Moreno.
Montero.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah,
listen, it's
yeah.
that's what we do, right?
Man,
All right. Anything else you want to mention about this?
no. Who do you have winning the World Series?
I think it's gonna be Texas, but I just to be on the other side of the fence, just to even us out a bit. I'll go with Arizona. I'll go with
It's a smart
Arizona in,
play.
in 6. And listen, this is the thing. They've proven people wrong so far. I could see them winning the World Series and us looking back weeks from now and being like, them being like, yeah, people just didn't believe in us. And
Yeah.
right, like it doesn't matter now. Philly's not in it. Atlanta's not in it. The Dodgers aren't in it. They're done. So like,
Yep.
stick a fork in them. Like I don't know, man. I really maybe it's Arizona, and I'm doing that partially because I looked back at my notes and it said, oh, this team was 14 games back in the West, but let's be serious, they aren't even on the same in the same category as the Dodgers, and then they go and beat
Yeah.
these teams. You know what? I should eat crow, and I'm gonna pick Arizona in 6. So,
Good for you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I like it.
All right. Well,
No.
listen, man, that's a wrap up for our World Series preview that we have. Listen, we just want to thank everyone again for the support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to be back next week again to break down the first few games of the World Series and give a few of our Sunday takeaways that we've got from the NFL. But
Yep.
remember, guys, if you like it, if you love it, drop a comment, right? If you don't, let
Right.
us know as well. But we'll
Yeah.
put those notes in the trash, right? No, we're trying to get better. So listen, if you got feedback for us, send it over, right? You can email
Yeah.
us
I'll
at
for sure
the
cry in the bathroom
yeah
with
yeah yeah.
any criticism.
Listen,
So it's fine.
quick tip
Yeah.
on that. My wife tells me to cry in the shower. That way she doesn't need to look at me and she can't tell. So
Yeah. Smart.
yeah.
Smart.
So, but
Smart.
listen, if you
Shout out to
guys,
Merveille.
yeah, yeah,
Shout out to
yeah.
Merveille.
Another shout out to her, right? Listen, if
Yeah.
you guys have any questions or feedback, you can email us at thepulsewa@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at WillieCreemanFF, or on Twitch on Sundays. Right before the 1 p.m. Eastern game. So I'll be on at 11:30 a.m. Eastern at Willie Creeman and answering fantasy football, NFL questions, all sorts of stuff. So, but enough of that. Thank you, Al. I love you, bro. Another good
I love you
one.
too, Willie, man. Stay safe and take care, man.
All right, bud.
Peace.
You too. Peace.